So still in the office of Bonster, now in exchange with Vladimir, credit risk analyst of Bonster B2B platform. Thank you so much for your time and your efforts.
Thanks for having me.
Maybe you want to introduce yourself because people don't know you yet in a few sentences, and also your position at Bonster B2B platform.
Yeah, my name is Vladimir. I started in Bonster in November 2019, so it will be 2 years. Before I worked in Malta, I started in Prague. I studied finance at the University of Economics, but right after my studies I moved to Malta, where I worked for 4-5 years in the portfolio management industry. And after I came back to Prague, I started right in Bonster.
Okay, which company has this been?
In Malta?
Yeah.
It was Gamma Capital Markets mainly, but I worked also in Hummel Partners, but mainly in Gamma Capital Market, which is a fund manager.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I think interesting in this interview would be to cover the due diligence process when assessing new loan originators. So how is the process, and why is due diligence that crucial as a part of the process of onboarding new loan originators?
I think due diligence is like the most important part, because it basically protects from having bad loan originators or even scammers on our platform. And it's much more difficult to do something when something happens. So we focus on the due diligence when we onboard new loan originator, because it's much easier to prevent it than when if for example you are driving on a highway and you have a flat tire, it's better to change it before you start driving than when it actually happens. And the process starts with our sales department. My colleague Ben usually gets in touch with a new loan originator. He does his research and he gets in touch with them, or sometimes it happens that the loan originator contacts the sales department. Once they have a call and they discuss the terms and they sign all the legal documents, such as non-disclosure agreement, my colleague organizes a call with the risk department where I'm present, and I explain them all the requirements we need from them, such as financial statements, business plan, for example, provisioning policy, business continuity plan, and all these procedures they have in place.
Okay, you're 2 persons in the department, I guess, in the risk department?
Yes, exactly. Me and my colleague Alia from Kazakhstan.
Okay.
She helps me with the translation of Russian financial statements, which for me, of course, are very difficult to see anything there.
But I think it's also important, this monitoring on the loan originator already on the platform, this ongoing monitoring. So maybe you can also tell us something about the monitoring of the loan originators you have in the platform already.
Well, we perform regular quarterly and annual monitoring, and during the annual monitoring we look at the audited financial statements, and during the quarterly monitoring we have a look at the internal financial statements, but we mostly analyze the loan portfolio of each loan originator. And of course it depends what product they offer, if it's payday loans, installment loans, secured loans, secured by real estate, cars, jewelry, gold, and so on. And depending on the product, we request different report. For example, for payday loans, we request vintage reports, which gives us information about how efficient they are in collections, how much of the principal they are able to collect within first 3 months from issuing the loan, for example. They also send us portfolio delinquency table where we can see the proportion of the loan portfolio as a whole. Was the portion of the portfolio overdue, for example, for more than 90 days, more than 120 days? And from this information, we have to adjust the financial statements as well. It depends what accounting system they use. If they use IFRS 9, it's completely fine. But in some countries, they don't comply with this IFRS 9. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we have to make necessary adjustment. So to give you an example, a loan originator can issue loans of, I don't know, 10,000 euros, and they predict that they will have 6% or 10% default. But you have to define what default is. Every loan originator defines it differently. Mm-hmm. And for one loan originator, it can be when a loan is overdue for more than 90 days. Then it's considered to be default. For another loan originator, it can be more than 1 year. It depends. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean that when a loan defaults, then you will not recover it. Then you start the collections process, the recovery process. And based on some track record you have, you calculate the losses or the recoveries you have from those defaulted loans. So for example, you are able to recover 50% of those defaulted loans. So from those 10,000 with 10% of default, you calculate 1,000 euros should go into default. Half of it you don't recover, so 500 euros you are anticipating not to recover. And that's what you create. You create at the beginning a loan loss provision because that's what you anticipate to lose. Mm-hmm. From the beginning. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it happens that the loan originator don't do that, so you have to adjust their assets, their loan portfolio, by this amount, so you can calculate their real profitability, because sometimes they inflate their revenues and they don't expect those losses. Okay. So this is very important when doing this financial analysis.
Definitely, it's a very important topic for us investors. For me, as an average private investor, I did not study finance or something. That's just a fact of an average private investor. So for me, it's very important that this risk department does a good job, because you're the professional. That's your job to do this for us investors, for Bonstar, but also to protect us investors of Bonstar platform. It seems like you might be very busy. Do you think that 2 people in the size of the company right now are enough for the risk department?
For now, I believe it is enough. But of course, as we grow, we will for sure need some additional analysts because of the regular monitoring.
Exactly. Because it's very important for us.
Yes, exactly.
I'm asking.
So we will need someone. Well, we will have to decide when will be the time. But for now, we are able to perform those quarterly monitoring.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then an additional question popped up right now from my side. To recap on that statement from you, you told me about the annual controlling with monitoring the financial statements, the audited financial statements. You mentioned audited financial statements, so all your loan originators have audited financial reports, yes or no?
No.
I don't know it, so I'm asking you.
No, they don't have. Some of them they do, and we have our internal rating methodology. And it works that way that we perform this analysis, financial analysis, qualitative analysis, and we assign them a rating. But if they don't have audited financial statements, they cannot reach certain rating. They have to be under that rating.
So how do you handle this from the controlling perspective if it's not audited? What can you do?
Yeah, we rely on their financial statements, what they send us, but of course we ask a lot of questions about those financial statements, and if we see some inconsistencies, we always ask additional questions. I mean, they have to match with the reports what we can see in the loan portfolio. You can do some calculations what revenues they should have based on what we see in the loan portfolio. And if it doesn't add up, there must be something wrong. So of course it's difficult to observe what financial statements we can rely on and which we can't. And we experienced in the past that some financial statements that were not audited, and we told them something that there were something missing or there was something wrong, they just adjusted it and they sent us new ones which were completely different. And once we see this, we just we most likely don't cooperate with them because they are not reliable.
Yeah. So not much more efforts from your side if
Yes.
they don't have this audited financial report. So I guess they also will have to pay higher spread because somebody has to pay the efforts. Yeah, that's the point. The investor or the loan originator, whoever. But there must be a higher charge, of course, I guess, for onboarding and monitoring.
It usually works that lower the rating, higher the interest rate for the investors.
And also the spread.
Yes. And also regarding the not audited financial statements, we also recommend them to put a group guarantee or some kind of third-party guarantee on their loans to increase the safetiness of those loans. For example, they can have an important business partner, strong business partner, who has audited financial statements, so we can rely on them. And when we see that, okay, this company is really good and is able to put a group guarantee on their company, it's very welcomed. And we sometimes do the structure like that, like the agreement with that loan originator. There is the loan originator and also the group guarantor.
Okay, awesome. I understand. So from the investor's perspective, it's still a good idea, I guess, to also take loan originators that have not audited reports right now. Maybe they have in future, just have the opportunity of variety and diversification, I guess, because there might be some gems as well that just don't have the audited report. Probably.
Usually startups and new companies, they don't have audited financial statements because it's also very expensive to get it. But they have a really high potential to grow, and they usually offer a high interest rate.
Okay, so yeah, then it's up to the investor again to make his decision, his homework, and have a well-thought asset allocation.
Yes, exactly.
And risk management from his side as well. But for me, it's also interesting because all these interviews are a big learning for myself as well. So it's an opportunity for me, this exchange, to educate myself from the practical aspects. Is it a big difference for you, or how do you see the difference between one of the big players as auditor, like KPMG or all the EY and you name it, or is it and then the small one? What's your opinion on that? Yeah, because there are some auditors just don't know from some foreign countries. How do you handle that difference?
They usually have known auditors like KPMG, EY, BDO, and
But how do you handle one of the small ones? Sometimes you see just an auditor, I never heard them.
well,
From
it's still
Kazakhstan or
better.
wherever.
It's still better than having not audited financial statements. And if we see an auditor which is not so known, we check their website. We check what is their reliability. If they perform audit on some large companies, so we know whether it's reliable.
Okay. So I think we already covered a lot additional to the long interview I had already with Pavel, the CEO of Bonster. One last question I would like to ask you, because it's also, I think, something connected to the risk department, and it's also a risk for us private investors. What happens in case there is a problem with Bonster? I wanted to ask this, not the CEO, because I already asked several times CEOs what happens in this case. What is your opinion on that if Bonster goes bankrupt, for example?
Well, there are separate accounts for operations of Bonster, and another account for where investors' money is held. So in case Bonster defaults, investors don't lose their money because it's on a separate account, which we cannot touch. So of course, some problems arises, but if Bonster gets into liquidation, there has to be a liquidator who handles all these procedures.
Yeah. Okay, this is an important point. So separated accounts, you say they have. We
Yes.
have to trust that. I have no chance to prove that, I guess. Yeah.
Maybe we can ask the back office who can see and do regular reconciliation to see whether it actually matches what investors have and what is in the account.
Because I think it's not about not trusting Bonster, but it's always interesting to go deeper into it, and the more transparency, the more sure I feel, yeah? And the more I trust this specific platform compared to others. And it was also a big learning for me in the last years, what you can take care about there. And also I think very interesting is that for me it was an interesting learning also on other platforms. We all know that story, that still the risk is not that high for the investors, because even if there is something wrong with the B2B platform, most of the money is at the loan originator from the investor, because this is the business. Because Bonster just transfers the money and has some cash maybe in the accounts of the investors, but all in all you just pass the money through. For example, that IBAN card transfers to you, you pass it to me as a private investor. So if something happens between, also the loan originators meanwhile more and more monitoring the platforms from the other sides, which is also interesting. This is also, maybe I have one more additional question up to that. But so if something goes wrong to the platform, we are only talking about that money that was in the accounts at this time, and that was in the transfer at this time. Because all the other money might stay at the loan originator, and then we have the liquidator, and he will put some connection.
There is also that part, like the skin in the game, which we held on the accounts that the loan originator has to have on Bonster's account, on the separate account.
Okay, again on the separate account, there is some skin in the game of the loan originator.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, but all in all, most of the money is at the loan originator, so they just pass it through the platform. And in case something happens, the only questionable thing is we will learn also out of that, because the story is, for example, on another platform, most of the audience might know what I'm talking about, where there are problems. For example, IBANCA says, okay, they have the money, they have it on a separate account. The only problem is they don't know each investor, so there is no connection. So it just has to keep it until they find a solution to transfer it to the original private investor. Yeah? So this is also a question, how to connect, if there is a liquidator, how to connect the investor and the loan originator. This is also an important topic.
Well, there is a database which, of course, the loan originator doesn't have, and we have it. I mean, like IBANCAR doesn't know who invests in their loans.
That's a fact, yeah.
That's a fact.
At all platforms.
Yeah.
That's part of this fintech
exactly.
procedure. Yeah.
So if a platform goes into liquidation, the appointed liquidator should have access to that database and come to a solution where he can distribute these investments from the loan originator to the investors. That's how it should be.
This is also for me such an important background information, and I try to go deeper and deeper into it by learning just for understanding the risk of the P2P investments in general, that I say, okay, we have advantages, disadvantages, pros and cons of this fintech system with the platform between. The platform itself is a risk, but also it's a big pro because you are controlling and monitoring the loan originator. The loan originator, meanwhile, also is monitoring the platform, which is two professionals that are monitoring each other, which is good for us investors because I cannot do this. It's simply the truth. Yeah? I can just learn and make as much research and homework as I can as a private investor, but you are the professional. But it's also interesting to understand the risk that even if there is something wrong with the platform, the money is still somewhere and it's not at the platform, most of it. It's only a part of it. So there is still something to be recovered, even if it takes maybe years. But it is here. eBanker, for example, does not pass it to somebody else. Yeah? It's just here and waiting for the procedure, however we can do it, but there has to be found a solution one day in example. But I hope on Bonster I have a much better feeling. So this is also the reason why I'm sitting here and still continue after all what happened in the industry. And I think it's wrong just to leave the industry after some incidents because this is simply part of the game. This is the reason why we make diversification. Otherwise we could put all in one bucket. Yeah. Okay, and I think there is still a big opportunity, and if you understand the risk, and now we learned so much in the last years, it's maybe even better. One last question popped up right now. You are talking about the formal monitoring, but for me it's also interesting the informal exchange. So are you in a continuous exchange also with the CEOs just to get the feeling, get the trust? Do you have phone calls regularly? Do the CEOs have phone calls regularly? What is the common procedure on the is it very different on each loan originator? Because this makes also some feeling, you know, it's not only the figures, it's also, is there a communication all the time?
Yeah, our sales department communicate with them a lot because of also like new batches of loans, the interest rate they would offer, the marketing material, but I'm also in touch with them regarding financial statements that are publishable to investors on Bonster, so they can have a look themselves and do their financial analysis themselves. So they don't just have to rely on our opinion, they can have a look. And about the communication with the loan originator, I am usually in touch with the CFO of the company, or if it's a smaller company, with their CEO. And they also present me like the new employees if they have any.
Okay.
And about further projects they might have, about increasing their volumes, how they're doing, how they're meeting their business plans, and regarding plans to expand to other countries, for example.
Okay, so it's always that exciting to have this exchange because I can learn myself as well a lot. So 2 more questions popped up right now in this last statement. First, okay, now it have been the COVID time, so maybe everything is different right now, but in general and also in future, do you also meet on site? Maybe they come here, maybe you go there, because for me it's always important to meet the people behind, because a phone call is for me a different scenario than sitting on a table in a sit-down interview and face-to-face.
I know that before I started in Bonster, there were some on-site visits, but since I started like 3 months before COVID, I visited only Czech loan originators in Prague, so I didn't have the opportunity to visit any loan originator abroad. I know that there was the previous CEO visited the loan originators in Poland. There were some discussions, But of course, during COVID time, it's very difficult to visit, for example, loan originators in Colombia or South Africa, Philippines.
Of course, but I would appreciate it a lot if the team would also, in future, would also again check on site, because it's a different impression in my opinion. This is also the reason why I'm here, for example, today, and why I go to the offices of the several loan originators, especially on that I prefer to invest in. For me, the interest rate I get as a private investor is always in some way, in some kind, to be seen as a compensation for the risk. So are you also part of the decision in the risk department for the interest rate you offer the investor at Bondstar? Or is it a sales team, or who does the decision, or who is in the decision making in the team of the interest rate you offer the investor?
Well, I give some recommendation to the sales team, like what I give them the information, what rating the loan originator has, and they negotiate based on this information the interest rate. Okay. Of course, if the loan originator is not willing to give such a high interest rate, they can decrease it, but usually there is not such a high demand on their loans. It's
market regulation.
So exactly, so they just have to increase it in case there is no demand.
The problem is that I guess not all private investors have the same information or the same background information, and are interested in so much research. Of course, it's their task to do that, but still, I think it's also a job of Bondstar to educate the investors, because this is why you have the service. This is part of the service, I guess, that a B2B platform has to offer their investors, that there are average investor with different information. So I think it's important that they also show them the risk analysis or your estimation of risk connected to the interest rate. Is there information on that you pass usually?
We pass the financial statements and like the presentation of the loan originators, and in the pipeline there is publishing ratings of the loan originators.
That will help the simple private investor as a service.
For sure.
To compare, to say, okay, because you have a lot of information, but the question is, how does the investor get all this information you told me right now from each loan originator?
For sure.
You know, this is a bit of a problem I see right now. I mean, anyway, I try to focus on a few loan originators I personally know, but for the average investor that just says, okay, I want to have diversification and that's it, might be helpful to have more information on that. One last personal question. I'm heavily invested in Ibanka, obviously, and I want to continue like that and even increase it in the next years, because it's such a special investment scenario I like personally. But still, I want to get as much information from all perspectives as possible, obviously, because it's my own money. What is your personal opinion as an employee of Bondstar and professional in this topic and risk analytic guy regarding Ibanka? What is your opinion on this company?
Well, when we did the due diligence on Ibanka, they were very helpful in providing all the documents and also the business plan, which was one of the best I've seen. And usually the loan originators are not so keen of providing the business plan because it's very confidential for them. But Ibanka was willing to provide it, and it was very detailed, it was conservative, didn't include like huge volumes for the future. And even though it wasn't profitable at that year when we onboarded Ibanka, we believed it will reach the break-even point soon. So, and their concept of providing loans backed by cars, I found it very, very safe.
Okay.
And also the structure of the company, the employees, the CEO. When I talked to them, it just felt great, and I just could feel like they are really professionals and they know what they're doing.
So good communication. Maybe you visit them on site in Fuengirola as well one day.
Yeah,
might be interesting
that would be
also
good,
to
yeah,
get impression from your side on site. But good communication. And you told me now how you saw them on onboarding, but you're still monitoring them, I guess. I know they don't list new loans currently on Bonster, but I really hope it changes. It might be changing in any way, as I was talking to Alexander Melis in the last weeks, that he will do some small testing amount again with new loans in the next weeks. But I hope that there is potential for much more amount on loans in the next weeks, months, years, especially when they go to Mexico probably right now and expand their business to Mexico. They maybe need more funding, and I hope it is through Bonster, as I know Bonster much better than other platforms they might use and have much better feeling, because it's always learning, and the learning was also by the track record, which platform does better, which one do I know better, which one do I trust more, and so on. And there's Bonster obviously in my top 3. So it would be something I would prefer a lot through Bonster. But first things first, so how do you see them today? You told me on the onboarding process, but how do you see them today?
I find them very financially healthy, and they handled the COVID crisis very well. I had a look at the interview Alex had on YouTube, and I know that they provided some grace periods, and they kept their default rate really low, and that's what I could see from the loan portfolio they sent me as well. And they are growing as a bit slower than they expected, of course, because of the COVID, but they are catching up again, and I believe we will be very happy to have them on our platform and to increase their exposure.
Because in any way you will have to monitor them, because there are still a lot of loans that are still ongoing on Bonster at the moment. Okay, so also so communication also from your side, I think positive.
And I also like they have this transparency website where every investor can check that the loan they are invested in is also on the transparency website from Ibankar.
Yeah, I think this is a good cross-check, this website, to control the platform, at least for us private investors, and also in future they will publish the transfers they made, so we can check if we received it in the account. Really last question, so thank you so much for all your time. How do you see in general, as a risk analyst and somebody who studied economics, the potential of the expanding plans they have for Mexico? Because for me this is a whole different story. Spain, European Union, I have the feeling I know Spain a bit, and I also listened to the clients of Ibankar in Spain, which was also important for me because they still have a good reputation, also from the client's perspective in Spain, and are well known also in Spain. But Mexico, whole different story. We all know that Mexico is different to European Union. How do you see these plans they have?
It's difficult to say. Like, I would have to analyze the Mexican market, how the regulation works, if there are no obstacles for them. But as a concept, if it works in Spain, I think it could work as well in Mexico. Of course, it depends on the behavior of the people there and their willingness to repay. Maybe they should anticipate a higher default rate. But again, if the loans are backed by cars, the risk decreases, and it depends on the local law whether they are able to sell the cars, get it into their possession, and then sell it. But
yeah, I get you. So I think what's the really unique selling point on this story, which I obviously like, is that they have this pledge with the car together with a very, very well developed fintech software. to proceed everything. I think this is the unique selling point they have. And of course the management is really taking care a lot, and we know very well personally as well.
Of course, in Spain you have, I don't know how it is in Mexico, but in Spain they have more developed databases, national databases, where you can check everything. Yeah. I don't know if it's in Mexico.
So we don't have the crystal ball, but we both wish them obviously the best for the future. Yeah. And I guess they will need funding again when they have this Mexico business, and I hope they will do it maybe through Bonster. And then you will have to monitor this as well, and I'm excited about your experience on that. Maybe we can also exchange on that point in another interview. Okay, so I think we covered really a lot. Thank you so much for all your efforts and your time. I know it's always also a challenge to do it in English, but it's a big challenge for me as well. Sometimes missing the words, but yeah, that's the way it is. But English is connecting all the nations, which is also very great, and all the cultures, and yeah, learning by doing. So now looking forward to exchange in our community in the comments. Please put the thumbs up if you like the content, and appreciate the efforts we do. And all the best and good luck to all of us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.